Hi, everybody. So thanks for coming. I'm going to take these Postit notes that we gathered and kind of do a grouping here. And I'm going to ask a few questions as we go. But this will only take a second. We have a few more? Thank you. Oh, look at that. All right. I'll put that one there. This is fun for me, but it's also got a purpose. Not sure where that one goes. Okay, if you can't read this, I apologize, but I'm going to I'll read them off. We have a grouping that's rather common, so interesting. Okay. Alrighty, hey everybody. So this talk is about estimates and no estimates. We'll come back to this in a moment. No estimates with a question mark, but I want to start out just coming up with a common definition of what we're talking about. Now, everybody's way up above me here. I can't see everybody very well, but we'll have another participatory part to this, and when we do that, we'll figure out how we're going to do that. So I'm going to talk to you about, first of all, the hashtag of no estimates. That's just sort of a consequence of talking about no estimates. If you do it in Twitter, you end up eventually with a hashtag on it. So I want to talk about a little bit, and then come up to a couple definitions of things so we have a common understanding. So first of all, the hashtag, I first started using this in 2012, and I believe I was the first one, at least in this conversation, to use the hashtag of no estimates. But what I was intending, because this came from earlier talks that I had given, I was talking about the sorts of things that people are reluctant to talk about, that I think we should be talking about when we're doing software development. And so basically, these are the status quo sort of items, the things that we just do because that's what we do. And I believe it's in those areas that we hide a lot of our problems, because we're no longer willing to discuss these things. Maybe it's too hard to discuss them. Maybe we're not allowed to discuss them. But one example of that was estimates. And as I started talking about these sorts of things and talking about estimates, it really turned out that there was a lot of reluctance to talk about it. But once you got talking about it, there was also a lot of what I would say difficulty in having a calm discussion. So I thought we should be able to have a calm discussion about it. So that's basically what the hashtag was for. I started using it in 2012. I didn't invent this hashtag to be controversial. I used it to use as a marker for this bigger discussion. And I'd written a little article for someone else that had been discussing this with about a project I worked on where we did not use estimates, and then wanted to know, how did that work? How did that go? So I wrote this article about it, and it really actually turned out that that got a lot of attention. And so it started building the conversation that I was really looking for. I wanted to find people who were interested in talking with me about problems they had seen with estimates and how they had dealt with it. So that was basically what was interesting to me, and this was a mechanism for getting that. I'm going to plug in my clicker thing here and see if that works. Okay. So the thing is, the controversy came for free. This was not what I had intended. It just was something that had happened. So let's go from there. I like to share this concept right here. I learned this about 20 or 30 years ago, maybe actually 35 years ago, from a gentleman who I wanted to learn some stuff from. And I tracked him down, and I said, I got this stuff I want to learn from you. And he said, yeah, I'd be happy to show you. However, that's important stuff, but there's something that's a lot more important. And he shared this quote from an artist with me from about 100 years ago. And I took this to heart. Basically, if we use this for software development, this we could read as, the object isn't to create great software. It's to be in that wonderful state where great software is inevitable. And I like to think of it a little bit more expanded, and that is to think that this isn't about creating software as such. It's about creating the environment in which software will just happen and the right stuff will happen. I want everybody to excel in their life and to excel in their work. And when we do that, we create that environment, we're going to get better stuff done. We're going to get the right things done. So what happened for me is this kind of became a guiding light, and that's what I'm sharing here overall. That is that if we can make an environment where it's safe for us to talk about things like are the estimates helping us, that's going to help us overall. Alrighty, so we have to narrow down the conversation because otherwise this grows into too much to talk about. So if I narrow down the conversation to a specific use of estimates, and that's all I want to talk about for the moment, then we can have a sane conversation. And I'm going to give you a little bit of that. So first I want to start with this. This is about, I'm asking, what is an estimate? What is the essence of what an estimate is? I've grouped them over here as the things that come to me close to guess. So here's one that says, a wild guess. Here's somebody who said wrong. An estimate is wrong. I think that kind of is a comment that's saying, regardless of how we do it, it's still not very helpful to us. And I'm going to kind of group that in guess. Is that okay to put in guess? Does everybody think that's okay? Okay. So here's one that says a guess. Here's one that says guess. Here's one that says it's a number. And I would take that to mean it's sort of a meaningless number. Is that okay to call that a guess? Tell me no or yes. Yes, okay. I don't want to force you to think the same way I do. What I want to do is come to a common understanding. We can move that out if we want to. A glance into a crystal ball. I'm going to put that under guess. Is that okay? A guess. Guess automatically goes under a guess. Guesswork. A guess. A guess. A guess. I want to get every one of these up there. A lottery. That's almost worse than a guess, but I'm going to put that over there, right? And this last one here is a prediction. Is it okay to call a prediction a guess? I'm going to call that a guess. We may have different beliefs about that. Oh, here's one that says a wish. So that's kind of like saying, well, I hope it's going to be like this. So I'm going to put that under guess if that's all right with you. All righty. Now here's some other kinds of words. It's breakable. It's difficult. It's an expectation. So is it really, so I'm going to move this over, I think, to there. It's getting an idea of how long something will take. Does it really give you an idea of how long something will take? Or is it a guess about how long something will take? Nobody's willing to, you're afraid of what I'll do to you if you say it wrong? We'll leave that over here. It's an interval. I'm not sure how to rate that one, so I'm just going to put that here. Here we have time, a measurement. I'm not sure an estimate is a measurement, but maybe it's an estimate of a measurement. It's resources. It's cost. So I could say it this way. An estimate is a guess about the time or the resources or the cost. Does that make sense? And over here we have a deadline, an expectation or an expectation. So a guess, an estimate is a guess about the time, cost, effort, whatever, so we can set a deadline. That's the beginnings of what I usually find. So when I do this, I've did this several times. I'm going to skip two ahead. This is one where I had a group of about 100 people who responded. This pile over here is, I can't use my arrow here, it doesn't work very good. About 25 of those stickies say guess or something close enough that the group accepted as guess. And then we've got time, cost, work. So we're making, it's the same thing you came up with here. I've done this exercise something like 200 times now, and I get a very similar layout to this. So are we agreed that an estimate is a guess about time or cost so we can do some kind of planning? Is that good enough? Shout it out if you get that. Just tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. Tell me I'm right if I'm right. All right, so I'm right enough. So then I could come up with this kind of a definition. So this is what I want to be talking about. It's approximate calculation or judgment. We could call that a guess. About the time, amount of time, work time or elapsed time, we'll talk about that next, to create a project, a feature, some bit of work in developing software. So that's sort of how I want to do it. When we say it's a calculation or approximate calculation or judgment, I'm going to replace the word guess. I think it's a guess. I should just change that in the slides. All righty, so let's do an estimate. Somebody's going to have to shout out So I hate to put you on the spot. Here it is. We're going to take this little thing to estimate. 3 months from today, you will need to write your name on a white index card with a blue fountain pen. How long will that take to actually do the work? We're not counting the 3 months. It's the day you need to do the work. How long is that going to take? Somebody. 10 seconds. You'd have to get everything first, but we could write the name in 10 seconds. Or is that what we said? Let's stick with 10 seconds. But you're kind of going down the right path. That's what we need to ask. Because if I asked you, so if it's 10 seconds to write our name, we have everything we need to do it. What if we needed to do it right now? How long would it take? Somebody venture a guess. An hour. What do we need to do to be able to do it? We have to find the index card, and we have to find the pen. So that's sort of what you were asking, right? So the actual work of writing the name may not be all the work, but an hour, I would say, is possible that could be optimistic. Because first of all, you don't know what size of an index card we need to write it on. And you don't know if we allow it to have lines on it or not. So that's a beginning. What about another requirement? When I say a blue fountain pen, do I mean a fountain pen with blue ink or a fountain pen that is blue in color? If you brought it to me and it's blue ink and I go, that's not what I meant, used a black fountain pen, then you wouldn't have met the requirement. So this is kind of the problem with estimates a lot of the time. We think we understand what we need to make the estimate of. We'll get onto this a little bit later. So this I just want to show about the actual work time, which is the time it takes to do the work if we don't have any waiting, we don't have anybody interrupting us, we have all the things we need to do it, and the day goes relatively well. So that might be the actual time to do it. No context switching. What happens when the boss comes in and taps you on the shoulder and they say, "Can I interrupt you for a moment?" And what do you answer when they do that? You already have, so clearly you can. So the other part of it, though, is elapsed time. So that's how much time. Sometimes we call this cycle time or lead time. I use elapsed. That's the time from when we first start the work till we're done with it. So in the case of the writing with the fountain pen, when we started is when we went out and got more requirements and said, what size of a card? Can it have lines on it? Is that a blue pen or is it blue ink or whatever? And then we go and buy the things that we need. Maybe we order them online and we get them. Now we do the actual work, which is what we thought they were asking us to estimate in the first place, and then we can deliver it. So that could take a while. Matter of fact, I've done this, like I said, this exercise several hundred times. In the audience, I usually ask, does anybody actually have a fountain pen with blue ink, an actual fountain pen? Does anybody have one here? This is a rare thing anymore, because we usually don't even have pens on us. You know, we're using our Twitter device. That's about all we got. So if we have these two different understandings of what an estimate is about, then we really need, there's some stuff we got to figure out. There's really some stuff we got to figure out. Our estimate's going to be useful for us until we have a good definition. Now, I like to do this little exercise, and I think I have enough people here to do it, but I'm not going to do it on Postit Notes. What I'm going to ask us to do is to gather into groups of 3 and 4. If you're sitting near people that looks like you can actually interact with them without getting in a fight, then group up that way. If nobody wants to work with you, that's telling you something you should pay attention to. So what I want you to do is just group into groups of 3 or 4, quickly come up with 3, 4, 5 ideas about why do we do estimates, and then I'm going to put a timer on. Then I'm going to kind of ask the audience, so each group be ready with a couple of your ideas, or maybe just one idea, and then we'll go and see how many unique ideas we can find. Why do we do estimates? You ready to do that? Talk to the people near you, or you can turn around and talk to the people behind you. If the people behind you are turning around talking to the people behind them, then talk to the people in front of you. Go ahead and do it. You got 3 minutes. I bet you we have enough ideas now. Did everybody come up with at least a couple ideas? So somebody just give me one of the ideas. Why do we do estimates? Because we have to. Because you've been asked to do it by somebody you can't deny. Okay. Anything different than that one? Well, I should ask first, how many got something like that? So that's at least 12 or 15 groups. And we only have 20 groups here maybe, right? What else do we get? For learning. Okay. What else? So time, effort, tracking. The tracking system we use requires this. Yes? So we're doing this so we can guess whether we can do this amount of work within this specific amount of time. Okay, what else? To plan resources. Do we plant enough corn this year? Is that what we mean? Like, did we buy human resources? Okay, they tell us nowadays, don't call humans resources. Call them people. What else? Cost benefit. So a cost benefit analysis as to whether there's a chance this will make money for us?
Yeah, or it depends, of course. But let's say, if the feature was, for instance, 2 weeks to develop.
2 weeks to develop.
Roughly. Then maybe the business says, no, okay, let's do something else.
We'll do something else because we won't get enough benefit out of it. Right. What else? Anything different? To set priorities. Should we do this first or that first? What else? To see if we have the same understanding. Anything different? What's that? For pricing? So that's so we can give somebody a price. This software will cost you 8,655,000 money units. And that's what we need to tell them so they can make a decision. Is that what we're saying? You're giving a bid. So somebody else can use that information. You're giving it to them to give them an idea of the cost. And that is one of the things we had there. Any others? I have a feeling there's probably 5 or 6 others, but they're nuances. Let's work with that, because I think I can work with that. So in software development, we use estimates to attempt to predict the future. Because, for example, we can do the cost analysis and determine if the benefit is sufficient only based on our estimates. When we actually do the work, maybe nobody wants to use the software we just wrote, and we goofed up on the value estimate. But I'm not really talking about value estimates here, just the cost side. But part of it is, let's figure out the cost. So we want to know things like, when will it be done? How much will it cost? What can we get done during this period of time? I think all these you brought up. How many people will we need? What can we get for this money? And then, of course, you said over here, because we have to, because somebody's forcing us to do them. And we want to keep our job. So this is sort of what we talked about. This is close to what you gave me here. But somebody else a couple of you took it a little bit further, because we don't just do these estimates and then we get that information. We're going to use the information for something. And so basically, why do we do them? We use this information to help us make decisions. And I think this is part of where the problem starts. Because we want help making decisions. And I've asked this question in many places. I very rarely hear back this. We want this information to help us make good decisions. They just want to help make decisions. I actually brought with me a very economical decision-making mechanism with me. And if I flip this coin, I'm not sure which is heads or tails, but I could say the side with the date, and I say if the side with the date comes up, then we'll do this. And if not, we won't. That helped me make the decision, because maybe I was reluctant to make the decision. So we don't just need help making the decision. We want help making a good decision. So, but we heard another one too. So most of it is we want information that helps us make the decision, also to spark the conversation. So I think a couple of you here kind of said that. This opens up the floor to the conversation. I'm going to kind of cover that later if we have enough time. I think there are other and perhaps better ways to have that conversation. I'm just kind of suggesting that. So I'm going to share with you some of my thinking. So we don't have enough time to make this a full workshop. But I just wanted to get a little bit of this to get information from you. Hopefully, we're on the same page as understanding why do we do the estimates and what an estimate is. We're making some guesses to help us hopefully make good decisions. So, part second, there are 83 parts, so we're going to have to rush through the rest of them. I want to talk about how it started for me. Have any of you heard me tell this before? Anybody here? Okay, because I was here a couple years ago, and maybe they've replaced all the developers they had then with new developers, I guess. So I want to tell this story because once this occurred for me, I started noticing something similar all over the place, and that's what started making me think we better be talking about this. So I took a job in 1999. It was the second quarter of 1999. I had just finished a contract that was glorious. The people didn't do estimates. They worked in a very extreme programming manner of delivering something into production or close to production, depending on what exactly they were doing, daily. They would take on some work very closely with the customer, start delivering stuff right away, and there weren't any estimates needed for what they were doing. I really liked everything about what they were doing, and I thought, I want more of this. And so as I learned about it, it was extreme programming. Most of what they were doing we would recognize now as being agile. So I thought, I like this, I want more of this. Well, I couldn't find anything like this exactly. And there was nothing called Agile then. Agile didn't come along till 2001 as a term, as a way of thinking about it. So this was the scenario. It was a large, important project for a company. They were hiring 200 software developers. Most of them were quite young. I was one of the oldest in the group, and this was almost, 20 years ago almost. But what I liked about it, they were going to do what's called IID, which is iterative incremental development. It's sort of like Agile. The idea would be that you're going to do some bit of work, you're going to get it into use, you're going to learn something from it. But they left out the get it into use part. Still, they were doing these iterations, and I liked it, and I wanted more of that. And also, a big part of this is that they were going to do a lessons learned at the end of each iteration. It was sort of an open-ended contract for me, but they thought this work would take 3 to 6 months. How long is a 3-month project, by the way? Can anybody tell me? 2 years. A 3-month project is about 2 years. It's very accurate. Thank you. So this did turn into about a 2-year project. I left after 6 months because I didn't want to be part of that, what I would consider nastiness of the test and fix cycle, breaking things and fixing them, and it breaks something else and fixing them, and it went on for a long time there. Okay, so I liked this. So here we are, the first week. They gathered everybody together, and we charged out to do our designing and our basically upfront work for this iteration. We were determining how much can we get done, how long would it take to do this thing versus that thing. They were making decisions like that, and then they designed the modules we were going to write, and off we would go to write them. And at the end of the 6 weeks, we did the lessons learned. I noticed 2 things from the lessons learned meetings that we had that really stuck out. The first one was our estimates were off. They weren't very helpful to us. Why did we not get as much done, and why was there a lot of things that took much longer than we thought they should take? They asked, how are we going to fix this? So what would you do if your estimates are off? What is one way that you can fix them? Maybe somebody can shout that out. What do you do? Well, multiply it by a number. Let's use 4. But yes, let's pad it. But what do we do? What can we do? We can inflate them. Well, that's kind of the easy way. They really wanted to sincerely do something. Get better at estimates. That's what they thought. We need to get better at estimates. Here's a bunch of young people. They really haven't had a chance to learn how to do estimates. They have to get better at estimates. So the management firm said, we'll get some trainers in here. We'll learn how to do the estimates. Also, the other thing I noticed was kind of twofold. We didn't understand the requirements, and they kept changing during the development period. So what do we do about that? Anybody want to take a stab at it? We should plan better, which kind of means we should understand better the requirements. So there wasn't clear requirements, so let's get clearer requirements and let's understand them better. And what else? Work closer with the client. But I'm looking for one thing we often do. Let's cover the second one. The requirements kept changing. Let's not allow them to change. So that's called change control. Hopefully you're not living in that world anymore. But that's what we decided we needed to do. Now, I didn't decide that. Me, being slightly older than everyone else, had already seen these problems, and I had a suspicion they weren't actually the real problems. So we worked hard to get better. We got some study on how to do estimates. We practiced. We worked diligently to do better estimates, and we worked hard to control the changes and understand things better in the first place. We charged off on our second iteration of 6 weeks, at the end of which we had our lessons learned. I noticed 2 things, maybe kind of 3, that we were having a problem with that came up as being important enough for us to try and improve. What were those 2 things? The estimates were off, and the requirements were unclear, and they kept changing. I don't need to go through it very, I can just bring them all out. We know what's happening here. They decided to do the same thing. Let's get better at estimates. We clearly didn't get better last time. Let's control the changes. Let's understand things better. We actually worked hard to do that. Everybody there was very diligent about getting better at their craft. They were trying to learn to do what was expected of them, what they were told to do. I'm glad you were here. That was a good thing to say. We charged off to do the work, and at our lessons learned, what did we find? Same thing. So, what do we do about this? By this point, I thought I should say something. You know, there was like 6 or 7 of us that were about my age group, and most everybody else was half our age. And I thought, being the kind of older guy, I wasn't a manager, I was just one of the developers. I thought, I should bring this up, and this is exactly what I said. I don't think we're actually dealing with the problem we're having. I think we're dealing with what I would call a symptom of a problem. And I had seen enough of these iterations, 3 iterations, that I could say this might be a pattern. So you hear this quote from Einstein, they attribute to Einstein. Does anybody know the quote I'm referring to? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome should be the definition of insanity. I don't know if he actually said that, but maybe he did. That's sort of what I saw here. They were expecting to learn something from doing this over and over. So I actually told them this in a meeting. After that meeting, nobody would talk to me. And that went on for several days, and I finally cornered somebody in a hallway, a young man. Unfortunately for young people, even though they're faster and stronger than us older people, they get surprised. So I cornered him, and he didn't know how to get away. I actually literally put my arms out, and I said, Jim, and he couldn't turn away. Now, he had to talk with me. Why won't anybody talk with me? And he said, the managers told us not to talk with you. So this told me that, yeah, I actually hit a nerve. This was a bigger problem than just us not being good at something. I won't go into the details anymore of that, but that led me to think I need to give a name to this thing. So this is what I had noticed. We would do something, we would end up with some problems, we would try to fix the problems, we would go further in doing that thing again, and this cycle would just continue. And I gave this a name. And I think that this is the same pattern I've seen now for almost 20 years at many of the places I've worked. I call it the cycle of continuous no improvements. And this can go on and on, week after week or month after month. We do retrospectives. We pick things we want to get better at, and we never get better at them. Okay, so I want to move just a little further, and I want to go kind of quickly through the next set of stuff, but I want to wrap this up by saying if the estimates were off was a symptom, what was the actual problem? I'm not asking you to answer that, but I would like you to think about that and have conversations about that. This is part of why I'm going out and doing these talks, is I want people to start being willing to talk about these things. If the requirements weren't clear, it's just a symptom and not the problem, then what's the actual problem? In other words, if we define the requirements a lot better up front and that still didn't solve our problem, then, because it was really about the understanding, but what is the problem? The last one was they kept changing. If that's not the problem, keeping them from changing won't solve it. What might be the actual problem? So I'm not asking you to answer that right now. These are the kinds of things I think we need to be talking about. Let's stop looking at symptoms and calling them problems. Let's gather up the symptoms and see what problems they might be actually the symptom of. It's kind of like if you have a food allergy and you get a rash on your skin and you put cream on the rash, what are we dealing with? The symptom of the food allergy. That's kind of what I'm talking about here. So part third, remember now we only have 80 parts left after this. I'm going to talk about some questions really quickly. I'm going to do this quickly. This is usually done for me as a 7-minute lightning talk, but I want to introduce it with this concept from Peter Block. Transformation comes more from pursuing profound questions than seeking practical answers. This reminds me of something my dad used to tell me when I was a kid. I heard him say this, something like this several times. He said, a really good question leads to a better question, not to an answer, until you finally get to a question that resolves itself. So you keep asking a little bit better questions based on the question you already have. That can lead you to the real thing you need to be dealing with. So I kind of like that idea. So sometimes I will take a topic that I'm interested in, and I'm noticing that everybody wants to get to how do we solve this, and I want to say what's the right question to ask instead of how do we solve it. So I'll go through a series of questions. I'll make up as many good questions as I can. I'll make up a question and I'll reverse the question. I'll ask it from 2 different points of view. I'll ask other people, what would you think about it? I'm looking for that better question. And I think that served me pretty good. So first of all, I like to imagine how wonderful things could be, even though I don't know how we would get there. I just know that we can always steer towards better if we have a process or a way of thinking that allows us to do it. And I like to take usually pretty small baby steps. It's not always the only way. This is really about the difference between the things we think we want and the really wonderful things that we could have if we allowed ourselves to have them. But there might be some problems that get in our way. So first of all, we want control and certainty. Control and certainty may be a problem. When we ask to have control and certainty, maybe there's something else we should be talking about. And in this case, we're talking about we want control and certainty of the time, the cost. We didn't quite get schedules on here, but we would normally, if we had 100 of these, we would find something like that there. Do you see where we're at here? We want certainty of these things. So to get that certainty, we need to make a bunch of guesses, and we try to do them as good as we can. Some people call them scientific or educated or reasoned guess. They're still just guesses. So we can do the planning that we need to do. I would ask this question. Can we improve our chance at wonderful if we give up this desire to have control and certainty? It's worth pondering. What does this have to do with estimates? So this is what I like to think. I believe that there may be, whenever I see a symptom like this or something that's showing itself to potentially be a symptom, I start wondering, is there a hidden problem? And I want to start investigating that and asking those questions. I don't think of estimates as being the problem. I rarely see estimates themselves as the problem. I think that they're a potential symptom. If I start investigating and I don't find a real problem quickly, then the estimates probably aren't a problem or aren't a symptom of a problem. They're just there. But I'm looking for what could be wrong with it. Everybody does estimates. Everywhere I've been and through many, many projects, almost everybody does estimates. Why do we do them? Well, partly because they seem like the right thing to do. How can something that seems so right to so many people actually be wrong? But to me, this is a great picture. My wife does all the pictures that I use in my talks. She's a children's book illustrator and author. She did this for another story. You probably recognize sort of the theme of this one. But I like this because this nice, attractive candy house could be a fun thing to go and enjoy an afternoon there until you get too sick eating candy, I suppose. But I like the smoke that's coming out the chimney. It's kind of indicating there's something sinister going on here. So that's why I like to use this in this slide. Often the things that look the best are misguiding us. We have to be careful about that. One question I like to ask is, how much work did we have to do to get to the point where we had sufficient information to come up with what we might consider a reasonable guess? How much did we invest in the first place? How much did we estimate that work? I've actually had people ask, can you estimate how long it would take to estimate this project? Has anybody else ever had that? I'm going to see. There's at least 15 people who've had that asked of them. How do we want to make an estimate about the estimate of how long it will take us to do the work? How many estimates do we need before we decide we'll even do the estimate? That's tricky. This what I referred to earlier. How do we know we made a good decision? One that I often hear is we use the estimates to decide whether we should do project A or project B. If we decided to do project A and we do it, what have we learned about project B along the way? Nothing. And if project A fails, we're really in a fix because we made a best guess as to which projects we should do, and now we really didn't learn anything. Should have we done the other one? Do we know it was a good decision? About the priorities, about how many people we should hire, whatever the decision happens to be. So I like to use this little bit as sort of commentary from Russell Acuff. You should read some of his things. He's got stuff on YouTube as well. I believe he passed away a decade or so ago. Managers who don't know how to measure what they want start wanting what they can measure. I don't think I have to even say anything about that. I've seen this. I would guess most of you have seen this. Because we can measure something, that starts becoming our goal. There's another famous quote, I think, is it Goodhart's Law? Someone will have to tell me. As soon as you turn a measure into a target, it stops being a reasonable measure. These are troubling things. Let's go on. Are these things we think we want, like those things we know we can measure, are they a trap? Is it start us thinking that we need to get those things? And I'm going to ask, does it make us become inflexible? And this is sort of the idea of the sunk cost fallacy. We've already spent 100,000 money units on this thing. We don't want to throw that away. We should get it done. And then we spend another 100,000 and another 100,000. Of course, here 100,000 is like a week's pay, right? I don't know. But you know what I'm saying, right? So whatever you're using to judge, we've already spent a bunch of money. That can force us into thinking we need to keep down this path that really isn't going to end well for us. But we don't yet know if it's going to end well. We need a better way to think about things. Is it a hardening agent? What I've seen often is once people make a decision, they're reluctant to unmake the decision. And I think that's something we need to really consider. We should make it easy to undo decisions as soon as we have information that shows us maybe we're going down the wrong path. So I'll give just one example of a thing. Is on time and on budget a good measure of success on a project? I'm not really going to ask you to say it out loud, but think about that for a moment. If you get the project done on time and on budget, what do we really know? It might be what we know is that we padded it, like you were saying here, so much that we couldn't get it wrong. And once we padded something that much, we end up using all the time we allocated for it. I've seen that also a lot of times. Hopefully you haven't much, but it's not uncommon. I'm going to share a couple of the, what I would call creative accounting things I've seen. We talked about the padding of the estimates. So if we know we need to pad that, why do we need to pad the estimates? Anybody want to shout that out for me? Because they're inaccurate, and we know something's going to go wrong. And it's probably based on there are a bunch of unknowns that we can't know right now. We're doing the estimates at the point in the project we know the least amount about it. So we're worried, let's pad it. Well, that's a creative, is that really a helpful thing to do? We're just trying to manage somebody's expectations. But I've seen this, feature cuts. A feature cut is when we've done a substantial amount of work on a project and we have some features that we know we're not going to be able to deliver because they're not getting through our testing process, and we literally cut those features out. That's to get us done on time. But if we're done on time and we cut features, did we really get done on time? We got done by the deadline, but it wasn't for all the stuff we thought we could get done. Another one, this is quite a bit more hideous, and that is that we are asked to not put our time against the bookkeeping for this project. I will not ask for a show of hands on that because that indicates some really deep problems. But in your heart, if you know you've been asked to do this, you might really want to delve into what is the ramifications of this. A similar thing to it is we are asked to work a lot of hours near the end of the project. You get crunch time. I will ask that. Has anybody ever had crunch time where you had to work extra hours at the end of the project? I'd say way over half of you have raised your hands. What this basically means is the next project, they will say, oh, that other project took 6 weeks. This next one's like that one. It will only take 6 weeks, which implies we're all going to have to work a lot of extra time near the end, if it was really that easily compared, and it's not. But these kinds of creative estimating mechanisms, or I should say creative accounting around it, ruins our chance of having good data if good data could help us. I'm going to suspect good data wouldn't. So I would ask this question, is getting better at estimates actually going to help? If it's just a symptom, it probably won't. Is getting better the only way? So I kind of like to use this as a kind of a bit of a joke, but it's really true for me. You've heard the old idea of garbage in, garbage out with data. If you give garbage into your reporting system, your reports are going to be worthless. But for me and junk food, I have weighed a lot more than I weigh right now. If I eat the junk food, garbage in, garbage stays. And then I have problems losing that weight. So can you eat junk food in a better way? Do you chew it more slowly? Do you chew it more quickly? Do you only eat it at a certain time of day? That might help. What things can we do to make the junk food less of a problem besides eating less of it or none of it? What can we do? Well, I want to suggest some of the possibilities, but yeah, you can't eat junk food in a safe way that will get rid of the problems of the junk food. Okay, so maybe there are alternatives. The alternative on the junk food is, one thing is don't eat the junk food. Another one would be fill yourself up on healthy food, and if you still have some room left, well, then you don't have as much room for the junk food. I don't know. You come up with your own ideas. This is a really question that I want to ask. If the kinds of decisions that we're making require that we use estimates, maybe there are some other kinds of decisions we should be making on our projects. I've already seen 4 talks here today, at least, 3 talks and the part of another one. And I'm hearing a lot of this over and over, ideas about how can we work in such a way that we can deliver small batches really quickly and learn from what we're doing. That's probably part of the theme of modern software development. There are other kinds of decisions, but we're asking, what are those decisions? What would they be? Maybe there are better ways. So we have just enough time to cover a couple more things. I want to wrap this up by asking, first of all, what should we be certain about? And I'll give you the answer of what I think. I think we should be certain about that we have an environment where people can excel in their life and people can excel in their work, where it's easy for them to do the best they can and they love doing it. If we create that environment, we're going to get the best results this group of people and this company is able to get. At the same time, then, we're going to be creating an environment where the great solutions are inevitable, based on that earlier slide. I want it to just be we put everything in place so great things will happen. That's the way I like to approach it. What must we control? There's lots of answers I can give for this, but this is the one that's worked best for me, I think. Let's control our urge to control things. I'll let that sink in for a second, but if we just quit worrying about having that control, that might be the best thing to learn to control. Once we've done that, a lot of the pain of all this other stuff can go away. I'm going to share a little saying from Bjarte Buksnes. Does anybody know who that is? Did I say his name correctly? Does that sound about right? There's only 1 or 2 of you know who it is. So I think he's right now the vice president of performance at Statoil. And he's written this book called Implementing Beyond Budgeting. But he's got this little saying I really like. The fear of losing control is a big barrier to change. The fear is a barrier. But much of that control is just an illusion of control. And I would say in most cases it is playing out an illusion of control. But the fear is real. And that's the problem. We can't ignore that fear exists. So we can't just rush back to our company and say, I heard this guy talking about NoEstimates and I'd like to do this. And then when you get there, you get fired for saying things like that. So I think that's kind of a warning. I know of 2 people who came back to me after hearing one of my talks or having me come and talk with their group about it. that they got laid off or fired because they were trying to introduce these kinds of ideas. So I don't say rush into it. I say be cautious. Maybe influence change so that at least in your company, you're allowed to talk about, is this thing working? Is that thing working? What might we be able to do better? That's sort of where we're at. So I think that I'd like to, how much time we have left? 10 minutes? 15 minutes. Oh, I should slow down and talk much slower. I have 2 sections I still want to cover. I do have a lot more material than this. And I'm going to be here for the rest of the conference. If you want to talk about this, I'm up for that. I want to just share some ideas I've heard from other people. Most of these I've heard at conferences or on videos of talks at conferences. Mary Poppins, who's probably spoken at this conference, I don't know, said this at the keynote at the Agile XP, the XP 2016 last year. I like this. Really successful digital organizations do not estimate. Estimates are for cost centers, not for products. A cost center is a place in a company or a department in a company where it doesn't directly generate income. They're there to manage something like facilities, and their job is to make sure everybody's got a desk. That will lead to us being able to work, but it doesn't actually generate income for the company. So what are estimates good for? She is saying the estimates are good for the cost centers. That makes sense there. Kent Beck, who hopefully you all have got some of these books, Kent Beck he's just full of wonderful ideas, and he shares them all the time. I love this one. An alternative to estimates. Do the most important thing until either it ships or it's no longer the most important thing. That's a simple rule. It's easy to try, and you would know pretty quickly if it's working for you or not. That's worth experimenting with. I like this one from Martin Fowler. Now, again, I'm showing these slides. I want to tell you, I don't know whether they agree with me on anything. I'm not trying to say this is proof of what I'm doing. I'm just sharing some other things I've seen. Martin says this, as teams progress, at first, they struggle with estimating, and then they get pretty good at it, and eventually they get to the point where they don't need it, or often don't need it. I'd like to start at the we often don't need it part, and not worry about the trying to get better at them. I think he's implying here, and I could be wrong, that we still need to go through this process of getting to where we don't need them anymore. I like what this, Michelle McCarthy says. She has a radio or a podcast kind of a show with her husband, Jim. One of the problems with the schedule is that it gives us the idea that we can take that long. So whenever we make a schedule, we're tricking ourselves. I think there was a law of that as well. Is it Parkinson's law or something like that? Work will grow to fill the time we've allocated for it. Once we make that schedule, we're going to get waste into that schedule. We put things off until the last minute, all sorts of things. Another really great, I love Ron Jeffries, and I really enjoyed this book he came out with recently, Nature of Software Development. Estimating when we'll be done is wrong. Forcing the answer is worse. And I think that's sort of what you brought up. We do the estimates because we're told we need to do the estimates. I've heard Bob Martin speak on estimates several times. He has a talk on doing estimates. And you can get a video of it from some of the conferences he's been at. He's also got a video on his website, the Clean Coder website, where you can buy the video. They're really entertaining. But he basically said this: the only honest estimate is, I don't know. Now, he still advocates for estimates. I don't have a problem with that. But if we really understand at the end of any estimate, we have to remind our boss or the person who's asked for it or whoever thinks they need the estimate to still say, here's my estimate, but really, I don't know. So after a while, they get kind of where they go, maybe we shouldn't ask that guy for estimates anymore. I don't know. But this is sort of, I think, what he's suggesting. He also said, I quoted him from a talk, most estimates are lies. So he's trying to get us to where we're doing at least honest estimates. So I'll share a couple more. Joshua Karaski, I worked with him for a bit in Industrial Logic. He's a wonderful guy. He's experimented, he says, in 2007 with what can we do instead of estimates, especially the story point estimates and velocity, and they dropped using them. And when I worked with him for 6 months, I was with his company, we didn't do any estimates at all. We were programming almost every day remotely, doing some mob programming. I never heard anyone ask for an estimate, or I never heard anyone giving an estimate. I show Fred Brooks. You know who Fred Brooks is. He wrote the Mythical Man Month. He's got this set of essays. Just because he's so friendly, and it makes me, by association, look like I'm a good guy. So I like this. I don't know if he's ever said anything about estimates that really plays into my thinking, but I like this one. It is very difficult to make a vigorous, plausible, job-risking defense of an estimate that is derived by no quantitative method, supported by little data, and certified chiefly by the hunches of managers. Now, I'm not sure if that really is in alignment with what I'm talking about, but I like this. I like the way he talks. I'm going to share a couple slides from people who have also been talking about this. Vasco Doherty wrote a book. I think you can get this book rather economically online. And this is something that he says. Basically, what he's saying here is that we make estimates about a system we know nothing about. We think that we have something we can make predictions on, but we haven't anything to observe yet. I like that. Neil Killick was one of the original people also talking about no estimates starting in 2012. And I like this little one that he says here. There are ways to deliver software with no estimates, and people are figuring out how to do this. If somebody says you can't do this, I disagree. I've been working this way for almost 10 years. Starting in 2009, I have not done an estimate for software development. And I've worked on dozens, if not 100 projects in that time. Interesting to me that people say you can't do this. Devil Panchal, who has given 3 or 4 great talks you can find online, he's got a lot of good to say about biases and our assumptions and the ideas that we just do things and we don't realize what's influencing us to do them. So it's worth looking up some of the stuff he's done. Estimates predispose us to a solution. I've talked about that already as we went, but what this means to me is once we've kind of made the estimate, we probably are going to stick with that path until maybe it's too late for us. Alan's here. He's given another talk. He also talks. He has a great video on no estimates, well worth the hour it would take to watch it. Easy to find on YouTube. He says, why do we estimate anyway? It's just a habit, a ritual. We do it even when we can't come up with an actual reason. You came up with some reasons, but I've been to a lot of places where you just do your estimates and you just can't question it. So we're getting near the being done. I think that I want to quickly run through this next little part. This is how I've actually worked without estimates. I'm going to do it probably faster than I should, but I think I can do it in 5 minutes. Is that about right, 5 minutes? So often people ask, can you ask, do you have any questions near the end of something like this? I don't think that's reasonable for us to do here. So I'll be here the rest of the conference. Just come and ask me questions, and we can talk. We don't need to do it like this. I'm just the same as the rest of you, just closer to the end of my life, okay? So the value of another's experience is not to tell us whether or how we should do something. It's to give us some kind of hope that we can also improve our environment where we're working. This is what I'm about. So I'm going to tell you, a lot of times a product expert, a product owner, whatever, brings you a project as if it's this work of art. Everything's neat, everything's in its place. It's really clean. They want to bring it to you, put it on your desk and say, that's the project we want, it's all defined, see you later. They think they've defined the project. But this is full of those symptoms that we were talking about. I think a project looks a little more like this. There's a different work of art. This indicates to me there's all kinds of stuff we're thinking about, but a lot of stuff we don't even recognize yet. And I think it's even worse that around the edges it's cloudy. And when we get near the edge, we go, oh man, there's a whole bunch of this over there, and down below, and up above. And we're surrounded by all these things we can never know up front. So this is what I believe. It's in the doing of the work that we can discover the work that we must do. We have to start doing stuff so we can expose reality. Let's find something to work on and try to deliver that. We won't do this as an exercise, but this is what I'm going to cover for just a second. Often, what ends up happening is we do estimates so that we can have the conversation about how long something might take, and we want to learn more about it. But what's important is the criteria on which we base those estimates. Let's see what that is. For me, I'm not looking for size or smallness. I'm looking for something I can work on. And I put it this way, it has to have some kind of potential value. It has to be recognizable. It means, like in that Jackson Pollock painting, I could see the different orange spots. Orange This is kind of indicating those things might be cohesive. Maybe those things should be brought together. Let's look at what that was. It needs to be understandable. Once we get something, I want to be able to understand it. If this is all the requirements on this project, I can't understand this whole project, but I can understand some small part of it. If I take that small part, I have something I maybe can get a chance to understand. If it's potentially valuable, let's just say I recognize that part as being potentially valuable, and I'm talking with my customer, say, yeah, that would be valuable for us to have. I can figure out what's cohesive, what belongs together and what doesn't, and figure out which one of these do we want to work on first. And now I've gotten something quite a bit smaller, and I did no estimates. This is clearly smaller than what this was originally, and each one of these bits is smaller. This is now smaller because we've taken out something to work on. I want it to be distinct. That to me means that it's very clearly a chunk. This is something that's distinct that I could decouple from the rest, and I want it to be cohesive. This stuff actually belongs together. If we're going to have 5 drop-down boxes, but 2 of them can be done as a pair and the other 3 could be done separately, let's do the 2 first. What we've done is we've got something we can now decouple, work on, deliver into use, and determine what do we learn from this. What I like to see is that this requires no estimates, and when I find those qualities, I have something I can work on. And this gives us another cycle. That cycle is we do a little of this, we do the work on it so we can learn something from it, and on we go over and over. We're delivering from day 1. I've worked on many projects now where we started delivering something of value in the first day or 2, and we just kept adding bits to it. I'm not going to give this example because we've run out of time, but in this example, what I talk about is how we discovered that there were some things that were more obviously important to the customer than others. Let's start on those. And if 80% of the features give us, or 20% of the features give us most of what we want, the 80% of what we want, let's go for those. We can't find those automatically. We have to do some work of actually delivering and seeing if it's delivering value. Once we found one of those things we think has value, I want to do as little of it as possible. When we do as little of it as possible, I'm looking for the 20% of that feature that will give most of the reason we wanted that feature. When we do this, I call it 80-20, 80-20. It basically means we can do as little as 4% of this project and deliver most of what the customer wanted. And I've seen this in action many times now. I call this deliver features until bored. Because once you start doing this, the customer starts realizing they didn't want the rest of that. They got the big things that was important to them done. So let's end this up. If we could crank up our ability to do that, let's do that and see how that works for us. That's basically this pattern. That we have an idea, we act on it, we deliver something, we've learned something, and we go on. And at every step, we will learn things. We can always go to the story stage and say, nah, this isn't good. Let's go back to another idea. Or get to the design and code and say, this isn't too bad, but we want to change some things. We have to be open to that. Now you hear me talking about the symptoms that we saw earlier and what was really the underneath problem. For example, change will happen. We don't get to say, stop the changes, because it's just going to happen. And of course, this is what Agile's about. We just do that over and over and over and over. Now, we should be done right now, so I'm going to go. This is the last slide. I've been doing this for 8+ years, and it's worked for me over and over again. And for about the 8 years before it, I was experimenting with it in different environments and was able to use it occasionally. Once a year, I'd get some kind of project where I could do that. So the most important slide of the whole pack, don't forget to vote green. When you leave, you put the green card in the thing. And I'm going to be here all day, and the rest of the week, I'm happy to talk with you. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming to the talk.